Hi, everyone. I am Jason Morgan, editor of Fleet Equipment, and welcome to Fleet Equipment Unscripted, the video interview series that connects you with the industry's top minds. Today, I'm talking with Colin Sutherland, Executive Vice President, Sales and Marketing with Geotab. Colin, how are you doing? We've talked to a number of your Geotab colleagues already, but how are you doing there at home?
I'm doing just fine. This is for about 6 weeks working from home, but as a person that's in sales, working from home or working from a hotel room, we're all used to that. So this is almost business as usual where we're working these days.
Right, exactly. Not, it's a little different than working at the Marriott, but I'm adapting well for sure.
That's good to hear. Yeah.
Today we're talking about asset management, right? How to improve your asset management using data and kind of giving everybody kind of a 101 example level right here, right? So today I'm going to play the role of, let's say, a fleet manager with a mid-sized fleet. Let's say I have about 100 trucks. I put ELDs in all my trucks. I'm all up on the mandate. And now I have all this data that I can look at and see, but I don't know what it means or what to do with it, right?
Yeah,
so I'm gonna call my industry partners, my providers, and ask them questions of how I improve and maximize the productivity and/or efficiency of my equipment. So I'll just kind of put it there. I have all this data. Where do I even start looking?
Yeah. I think though you start looking is actually not, you mentioned ELD, but part of ELD is the DVIR, the pre and post trip inspection data. And I think before you start looking at how are vehicles being driven, what trip durations do they have, what times of day are they driving, allowable hours, let's just take that first step, that, like you're saying, that asset utilization 101, which is how healthy are my assets? And the DVR is a pre and post trip inspection. This is the opportunity now, I think, for fleet managers that have deployed the technology to say, is my fleet maintained well? What mile per gallon am I getting from my fleet assets? Am I running my 6.5 mile per gallon trucks to do the job of a 12 mile per gallon straight truck? So it's really that opportunity for you to really first and foremost look at the assets you've got, use the DVIR technology that most likely came with your ELD investment. People think that that DVIR is a vehicle inspection report, right, where the driver does a circle check before the trip, and then after the trip is completed. And don't overlook that, right? It's not just a compliance or a due diligence tool, the DVIR. It's actually a very tactful tool for fleets to say, well, if this can tell me how to remotely manage my fleets, because you may not be in the maintenance yard if you're the service manager, you may be working from home, but you've got all these assets now deployed all over the country. You need to use DVIR to remotely determine, are my vehicles healthy? When can I schedule them in for service? So that's, I think, the first thing about asset utilization is how healthy are they? How productive are they? And also trying to identify which assets might be candidates for an upgrade. Some of those assets you've got might be a little long in the tooth and maybe right for an upgrade. Right. That's where I would start.
Okay.
Let's talk about the ELD though. So that's the ELD technology is for a lot of small fleet operators was the first time they deployed an electronic logging asset. They had AOBRD before, but ELD is a different story, right? All the folks listening to this know ELD is not just the AOBRD kind of due diligence part. ELD had all kinds of extra things, but annotations and allocating for time. And you're going to be able to see how your assets are being driven. But I think specifically, I would focus on the zones that the vehicles are stopped in. It's this combination of the people that are specifying or buying assets, understanding where are they parked? Are they parked inside a warehouse zone, a detention zone? If you're delivering to a place that says you must deliver and pick up at a certain window, how am I hitting my windows right now? What is the impact of this COVID situation on us hitting our pickup or delivery windows at large places, right? Is that being affected? And I think the idea there is what we're seeing as a trend, I think, which will continue, is the concept of using the asset for longer. So we increasingly are seeing 24-hour use of truck and trailer assets, where before COVID, even in February, was more of a regular shift, kind of 9 to 5. but increasingly we are seeing a lot of activity happen now between midnight and 4 a.m. when we're tracking, asset utilization, which is really interesting to me to track that kind of activity. And it's literally like peaking the midnight to 4 a.m. time. So that's of interest to us right now.
Right. No, for sure. And I think in a lot of these conversations, I'm sure what fleets are dealing with too, two of the biggest things that you've mentioned, number one, service for sure, because you can't afford you can never afford to let a truck go down. But I think right now, maybe it just feels more impactful. And as you said, they're running longer than they ever have, really in decades, because of some of the hours of service exemptions. And then the routing is something that has really come to the surface too. Change in traffic patterns, change in congestion. I want to follow up on the DVIR really quick, though, because that's a really good point and something that when you're using it, and now it's built in the ELD, fleet managers can now build a digital history of service needs, right? So when you say how healthy are the products and what kind of visibility would I have into that or expect from that from my my telematics platform? Is that something that the platform should tell me in like an aggregated percentage or a vehicle view, or is that something that I should parse through just the digital data in terms of what's being caught in the inspection?
It depends on your provider, right? From an ELD provider, some ELD DVIR systems are simply due diligence systems that the driver has flagged that the vehicle is safe to drive, or I can drive it with some challenges to it, but the driver still feels it's safe to drive, or it needs to be repaired and it's not drivable. So some literally DVIR systems are set up more of a due diligence versus taking the data, putting it into a database, and then triggering off alerts that if the driver said vehicle safe to drive but has a challenge with it, that should trigger off an alert to a central maintenance person to investigate deeper, schedule the driver, when can you drop that asset off, and where can we maintain it effectively. We certainly are trying to prevent the catastrophic repair. So if the driver is saying, I can drive the asset, but maybe you need some maintenance done in the next very short window of period, well, let's schedule that in and not wait for, as I said, a catastrophic situation with a vehicle down, which costs time and money. And again, when you're talking about in the past, a vehicle down, a roadside breakdown, it was very expensive to the load. It was very expensive to the driver. But think about it in these terms today. You get a roadside failure right now of a tractor, and where is it safe for your driver to go?
Right.
You have to be considering the safety of the individual. You just can't put them into a rental car or have somebody pick them up curbside. No, social distancing all in effect. Yeah, so it's absolutely, I think, our obligation to really focus on the maintenance and health of that asset. And anytime a driver says, there may be a problem, but I'm going to take this rig out today, that should flag some event that says we need to get on top of that right away. We just cannot have that driver in any circumstance where we can prevent a roadside failure.
For sure, for sure, and even on the equipment management side, who knows how various roadside service hours are running now? I know that shop service. We've heard reports of shop service instances and preventive maintenance schedules still moving along, but the rate has decreased a little bit. Whether that's technicians are furloughed or the social distancing is slowing stuff down. So yeah, you don't want them stranded out there and then just have nowhere to go, for sure. On the routing side of things. When I'm looking at that, do you have any tips for how I manage I had a plan for getting my load to where it needs to go, but now I see that maybe there's a slowdown at the receiver, or, my truck's gonna wait there for 5 hours. It'll get there in 2. Do you have any tips for how I, as a fleet manager, can manage that, or even work with my dispatch team to roll with those unexpected routing issues?
I think that the thing that we've seen happen in the last 5 weeks, but we've actually been tracking it and reporting on it in a blog post recently by city, is that with the reduction of traffic congestion, that trucks are getting to the destination faster, not slower. Right. So you may have previously done a scheduled route based on what you knew to be true in January or February, but now that vehicle's getting to its destination much quicker. Well, you need to make some adjustments in your routing and scheduling engine. If you haven't done that, you need to be doing that. Because again, there's often cases where there's a window for your truck to arrive. And if he's arriving an hour early or an hour and a half early for the good to be transferred off of the trailer, well, that's obviously a waste of the individual's time.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, I think that's from a routing perspective, that's interesting. I'm also seeing the impact on last mile delivery impact the tractor trailer world. So we're seeing this, the transfer of people buying products online, the bulky, heavy goods from companies that are selling sofas online, and now they're delivering to your doorstep in the residential neighborhoods. And we're seeing the Class 8 fleets, and to some extent even the Class 6, 7s. But I've seen tractor trailers pull down neighborhoods delivering sofas when, quite frankly, again, that's a 6.5 mile per gallon asset doing the job of absolutely a 12 mile per gallon, straight truck. And we need to make sure that, just from an efficiency perspective, that we're identifying that right now. So just don't make some assumptions based on what you knew to be true in January, February. Let's make sure that we're putting the right fuel economy vehicles, the right maintained equipment in for the right delivery duty cycle. And let's face it, last mile's the growth market out there today. It's got a lot of clients that are in that last mile delivery space. And if I were an operator that was acquiring or procuring assets for my fleet, I would be asking back into the business right now, where are we seeing our duty cycles? Are they residential? Are they urban? Have we changed in the last 6 weeks? Do we expect that change to continue? And should I be sourcing different kinds of assets today? And the good news is that, from an asset perspective, doesn't mean you have to buy them. There are organizations out there that lease assets. A couple of them are our clients that have our technology in the leased asset. And go lease the vehicle. That comes with ELD. It comes with that technology. Bring that into your fleet, and I'd say upsize or right size your fleet right now without having to worry about procuring new vehicles. But I would be heavily focusing on, this is the short term, probably for the balance of 2020, taking a look at, what does my fleet composition look like today? Do I have to acquire them, or should I be augmenting my fleet size by renting, and then just trying to figure out what my new normal is at some point later on this year?
Right. No, that's super interesting. I can attest to buying heavy furniture too, because all my home office stuff I bought within the first week of having to fix them up. So all the desks, all the chairs, all right. So definitely with you there. But this is really interesting too. I wonder if there's more here, right? So I have my duty cycles, and then I should have visibility into what mile per gallon kind of fuel efficiency range that vehicle is in, right? But then I would kind of want like a cluster of, okay, those are the vehicles on these kind of routes. I mean, is that something I should be, how do I see that in a platform? How do I communicate with my provider of, this is what I need to see, or can you help me visualize this so can get my arms around it?
Yeah, so you want to be using a tool with grouping functionality. So you want to make sure that in your, we're a telematics organization. So in our functionality, you have an unlimited number of groups that clients can set up. Now, one group could be vehicle class type. So you could literally just have groups of, here's all my assets that are running, 6 to 7 miles per gallon. Here's a separate asset group, which is 7 to 10 and 10 to 12 and so on up the line. And you would study that by zone type. Where are my vehicles stopping? And then you would run a report by all the assets that stop inside this particular zone. I would expect to be servicing a 10 to 12 mile per gallon asset class. Well, if I see 6 mile per gallon grouped assets appearing in a zone or stop zone that I would have equated to a better fuel economy, that's an easy flag. It's an easy thing to set up in software immediately. And you can just see how efficient are we dispatching the right assets for the right types of delivery cycles that we expect.
Right. No, that's super interesting, because if you think about it, like, I don't really want to swallow the cost of leasing a vehicle when I have a vehicle sitting here. But if that vehicle gives me, double the fuel efficiency, if the average of a class 8, my tractor trailer is 6, and as you said, I could do it in a box truck that will give me 10 to 12. Okay, well, I'd be able to see, okay, I can work that at scale and save money actually on doing this, right?
That's the name of the game, isn't it? I mean, when you think about it's been published about the freight rates and how freight rates are dropping per mile, right? It's all about running cost per mile and freight rates per mile. So give yourself a competitive advantage. Do not run an asset that's costing you $1.10 a mile to run, when you could actually rent an asset and put it in there and be competitive at 80 cents a mile and compete on that load. Like, it's all about just understanding your running cost per mile per asset and making sure you're matching that up now, right?
Right. No, I know, but I hate it because my stomach turns when the asset just sits against my fence.
I know. Man, I was at Freightliner in 2000 when, for those of people, maybe yourself included, remember what 2000 was like in the trucking industry, and it was not a pleasant time. We had residual values drop off the bottom, so the trucks that we had on lease, they came back to us after the third or fourth year, and the trucks' residual value was significantly lower than what we as a manufacturer guaranteed, and we were renting football fields and parking trucks. It absolutely gutted people to be parking these perfectly good 3-year-old trucks. We were cannibalizing trucks for parts. It was cheaper to cannibalize the truck for parts and then still run assets that were, economically speaking, the right asset for the right job. And I don't think we're in that recessionary cycle right now. This is a very different type of environment. Back then, 20 years ago, it was a glut of inventory on the market and a slowdown in the economy due to recession. We're just seeing the opposite right now. We're seeing we measure fuel up events. You find this interesting. So across all the different classes of vehicles that we have in our portfolio, heavy duty, medium duty, light duty, multi-purpose, et cetera, we look at fueling up events and consumption of fuel by asset class type pre-March 15 and post-March 15. We're actually seeing medium and heavy duty almost back to the dates pre-pandemic, which means that they're very active. So we see medium and heavy duty truck right now really fueling up a lot and really being used a lot. Right. I don't think we have a problem with trucks not being used. The question here is, are we using the right trucks for the right duty cycle? That's the concern.
Right. I know it's still, and I deal with this even in my own content analytics world of like, my assumption is wrong, right? Like more often than not, my gut feeling is wrong because the data will tell me what's actually happening, right? So even if I'm a fleet manager and I see this, being able to communicate that internally with my fleet. So if I do make a pitch for, I want to go lease a piece of equipment, but it's like, well, you have enough equipment, don't go lease that. Right. You can show them like, no, look, here's the dollars and cents of it. Here's where things are being used. We'll come out on top of this. Is hugely beneficial.
I think the hard part is that, and for all of us in our lives right now, we're trying to determine, as an economy restarts, is the current situation that we're experiencing in May, June, and July something that we should be forecasting our new assets projectively for the next 3 years? Or are we just doing this month to month right now and seeing how it goes? And I think that's the reality, is that we're kind of seeing how it goes month to month. So I wouldn't be making any procurement decisions based on my May 2020 activity or June or July 2020 activity. I would be absolutely trying to make some leasing or rental option to bring assets into my fleet to get me through, ideally get me through competitively so I can compete in the market for the freight rates that are out there. But long term, that's the hard part. It's that 1, 2, 3 year projection when you're buying a truck or a trailer. Yeah, it's a long-term CapEx expense. You gotta really be planning it based on data.
Right. No, for sure. And a lot of those conversations cropping up right now. And I even just anecdotally, I know we talked with Geotab on the electric truck development, even right when the pandemic first hit. And even then, we're still seeing lots of interest and readership around electric trucks. So you might think like, oh, that's something that people aren't doing anymore. It's like, well, no, the life cycles are so long that it's still in consideration. Maybe it's on pause now, but people are still investigating and researching what to do.
And investing in infrastructure, right? So now you have the chance, and maybe there might even be some federal funding associated with infrastructure spending. Now's the time to invest in those transformers and large charging infrastructure expenses that you thought you need to invest in. Truck itself, you're right, the running cost per mile of that electric truck, depreciating over 1 million miles. Great story to buy anything electric, because of the long duty cycle and the low cost to maintain those equipments over a long mileage. It's the infrastructure spending has always been the CapEx expense that we don't want to go through. I'd be keeping my radar on big time. If I was in procurement, I would be looking for every possible infrastructure spend that I could associate with. Let me have the government funding of my electric infrastructure. Right now, I would be looking all over the place for that kind of money.
For sure. Well, Colin, thank you so much. I could talk your ear off all day. This is fascinating. Really appreciate all the great insight. And I'm sure we'll talk to you again.
It's been a real pleasure. Yep. Take care. And wash your hands.
That's right. Social distance.